and start recording this. And we will kick off talking about analyzing consumer markets. If any of you ever want to try to become a marketer or to get into the PhD program, consumer behavior is kind of a fascinating subject. Consumer behavior in marketing probably didn't start until the 50s and 60s, where you started to see psychologists who were working outside, like Festinger and Milgram and many of those other psychologists. You started to see their work being used in marketing, because quite simply, if we're selling to consumers and the consumer is the focus of what all marketing should be, then the logical step is that we need to know as much about the consumer as we possibly can. And so this is kind of our discussion of consumer behavior and our understanding, or hopefully our way of grasping and understanding the forces that work within marketing, okay? And so let's just start right out with one of those basic definitions about what is consumer behavior. And so consumer behavior is the study of how individuals and groups and organizations, in this context, how consumers buy, select, use, and dispose of goods. And although consumer behavior, human behavior takes in the vast amount of discussion in psychology, what we're concerned more than anything else is what do consumers, or how do consumers buy, and how do they purchase? And so probably from 1990 to maybe 2010, you pretty much focused or concentrated on consumer behavior as being your specialty. I was kind of absurd or a little bit unique. In 2009, when I got into Bill, I wanted to be in marketing channels. And I really didn't have the ability, because everybody was working on consumer behavior. What a difference a decades make. I mean, I've got so much just in the last year talking about channels. I got enough to work on until I retire. However, still saying that, no matter what I do in channels, we still focus and understand on how the consumer goes about and selects those particular things in which they enjoy. And so the first thing that it's important to understand is that there are enormous cultural factors that influence us as to how we go about and buy things, all right? And culture is probably number two when it comes to the things that influence the items that we buy. And of course, number one, and we'll talk about that, is your family. The family, no doubt, is the single greatest influence on your behavior as a consumer in your lifetime. But you can't match cultures and subcultures. And so let's see. Oops, I'm sorry. They did not. Their slides don't have the same ones I do. So let me write out what those are. My bad. That gets me from letting graduate students post my stuff. Serves me right. Okay, I got it right. So, what is a culture? All right. A culture represents shared values. Culture represents the shared values, beliefs, and customs practiced by a group of people. And we find culture has an enormous influence on those particular items that we enjoy or the things that we desire. And so if I'm going to say something like barbecue, then I'm going to say that I would like barbecue, and I'm thinking to myself, well, barbecue is the same everywhere. We have North Carolina barbecue, South Carolina, Kansas City, New Orleans, Alabama, and I'm not even touching on other states in the north. Each one of those has a unique cultural sense about what they consider to be more valued than other. It's an interesting, though, also that usually you find this, especially when it comes to ritual behavior. And there is no more ritual than funerals and weddings. And so, if you're like myself and you're Catholic and you had your wedding, the wedding's still going on, okay? I mean, that's how Catholic weddings are. The weddings may be an hour, but like I said, the receptions are still going on. It's 10 years and my wife and I are still in the same party, okay? And that is the nature of a Catholic wedding. Whereas I had a friend of mine that is Pentecostal, and we were there for about 15 minutes and everybody left and we were the only ones standing, all right? That's an example of cultural influences. By the very same token, funerals. The Irish wake is actually something, especially in my tradition, was that Jerry Clower made a joke about it. You used to sit up with the dead, all right? And so a wake literally comes from the discussion that from the 19th century, there was always the concern and possibility that someone wasn't actually alive. And so the ritual practice is that you stayed with an individual that was passed away, and that individual was generally in someone's house at the same time. And so that's what a wake is. And of course, once again, if you're Irish and especially Catholic like myself, wakes are very much different than perhaps others, because after the individual has passed away and they are buried, generally what happens is you have a party. And it is not in a, the word I want to use is not in a shameful way towards the dead, but it is an honor and a remembrance. And so that is the nature of those kind of cultures. Now, also within cultures are also subcultures as well, all right? Subcultures as well. And subcultures can be things such as religions, nationalities, geographic regions. One of the things that fascinates me about living in North Carolina, I'm originally from Mississippi and Louisiana, is the amazing difference between Western Carolina and Eastern Carolina, the enormous difference of 3,000 feet down to 25. And in that region, you have sub-regions as well that are as unique as distinctive. And I think also that has to do with the Appalachians having their ability to isolate areas at the same time. In New Orleans, you have distinct districts that are Italian, Irish Bayou, each one of those areas that were settled by nationalities. And it's a very rich and eclectic culture. I grew up on the Gulf Coast of Mississippi. There's a large Yugoslav group there that settled in the 19th century. There's a Vietnam group that is settled there right after the boat lifts in the 70s. And so all of this is an example of subcultures that team and create their own unique ways of, in essence, sharing the goods that they have. Let's see, I have a chat. Oh, yeah, yes. Okay, thank you, Chad. I'll take that.
And so we talked about culture, we talked about subculture, and of these things, I want to talk about other influence structures besides just the ones that we talked about in terms of culture. I want to talk about the social factors as well, all right? And so these are an even greater influence on us, especially when we go beyond that third level, which is the family, all right? And so there are many different kinds of reference groups that we have, and it's important to look at those groups in terms of membership groups. We have what are known as primary and secondary membership groups. And so primary groups are those in which the person interacts fairly continuously with. And I should also say this is a cohort as well. You individuals are what are known as a cohort, and a cohort is a group of individuals with a shared related experience, okay? This could also, oh gosh, it would also be considered psychographical as well, because cohort groups go beyond all barriers that we might understand, and you share a related experience. Secondary groups are those individual groups like religious and professional organizations that you have a less continuous interaction with, but you still have some kind of professional or off-professional association as well. Aspirational groups are those groups that you desire to be a part of. That for you, the finest thing that you could ever be is to be part of this group. Dissociative groups are those groups you want to be no part of. And they can be just as great an influence on you as anything else would. The last is what are known as opinion leaders. And opinion leaders are basically those who are considered to be experts in a given product category. And they lend an enormous amount of weight to buyer behavior because we look to these individuals as being somewhat aspirational, that we would want to be a part of their group when it comes to their particular items. So way back when, there was a coach by the name of John Madden. John Madden retired and he became a broadcast announcer on, probably in my own mind, one of the best football broadcasting, I would say, teams ever. And that was him and Pat Summerall. And John Madden is by no means known as being a technical guy. But in 1989, a group wanted to make a football game based upon what he considered to be football. They wanted to lend his name to it. And you got to look at John. He kind of talks like this, and he runs off a lot like that. He has that kind of voice like that. And he talked to them, and he wanted to see what it looked like, because if it's my name, I got to know, kind of like. So he looks at it and he says, "Oh, there's only 8 players," and they're like, "Well, the graphics aren't good enough, because I mean, you just can't put 11. No, football's with 11 players." So they had to rewrite the software to be able to do what he wanted it to. And then a couple of years later, he's like, "Ah, what happens when somebody gets hurt?" And it's like, well, nobody gets, no, football, people get hurt. We got to have people get hurt. So, they rewrote it so people would get hurt playing a game. And it's like, we're all the NFL. Well, you can't have all, no, football, you got to have all 32 teams. And so they kept constantly rewriting NFL, Madden NFL over and over again because they couldn't satisfy John Madden. Now, the Madden of NFL now is a sad copy of the Madden when John Madden was in it every day. But by 2010, Madden was selling 3 million copies every year because every year they always had a new update. And this is the example of an opinion leader. Madden knew nothing about writing software, but knew everything about why people like football. And he was writing in his memoirs, and it's kind of interesting because the Super Bowl was on. And one of the things that one of the broadcasters of the Super Bowl said is we're trying to make the experience watching live football as interactive as it is on Madden. And so here we go, life imitates art. I mean, one lends to another. And so this is an example when an opinion leader actually forms, are thought of as experts and people believe it and we go on with it. So I talked about family, the number one influence on your buying habits from now to the rest of your life. Except of course, after you're 18 and you purchase the first thing you purchase, the first big ticket item. What's the first big ticket item you purchase out of college? Cars. Thank you, sir. You're right. Automobiles. And anybody in here buy minivan their first time? Nobody? No, of course not. Because you're not talking about your family of orientation, you're talking about your family of procreation. Your family of orientation is the family that you grow up with. The family of procreation is actually the people that you prefer to be around and to associate with. And so the family of orientation is your parents and your siblings. The family of procreation is your friends, your spouse, and your children. And so let me just give you an example of what the family of orientation. Any of you for your first insurance, like when I don't know what age you started to drive at, where did you get your insurance from? Parents. Parents, exactly, okay? That's exactly where just about everyone does. Now, once you get out and you buy your own car, then you start looking at other things to go out and buy. It is not surprising that Progressive is owned by Allstate, okay? Because what Allstate does is they reach for family of orientation with the traditional channels with Allstate, and they reach for the family of procreations by using Progressive, all right? Because both demographics find two different ways in which they look for insurance, all right? And so this is an example where this family of orientation and procreation take care of themselves. So we talk about the influences that are external to us, such as our culture, our subculture, our families. Then we also have those particular things that are also psychological, that are internal, that also affect how we buy as well. And so these key processes listed here, all of these are considered extremely important, and we're going to go through them one at a time. So, motivation comes from our original description of a need, okay? And so, at the start of the semester, I may have shown you my funny stick figures, and this is your ideal state, and this is your actual state. And I described the need as the difference between your actual state and your ideal state. The pull or the desire for your actual state to meet your ideal state is what motivation is. It is an arousal. If we're looking at Morabin and Russell's marketing scales, They're called pleasure, arousal, dominance. Motivation is an aroused state. And in other words, emotion is an evaluation, okay? Emotion is I'm happy, I'm sad. The thing that pushes you to that direction is the concept of arousal. And so when we're aroused to a sufficient level of intensity to drive us to act, that particular thing is known as motivation. So there are a lot of definitions of states that we talk about with motivation, and I'm not going to go into Freud because Freud, it is not necessarily that it is no longer significant, but we tend not to look at Freud as much as we look at the others too. We all understand what Maslow's theory of hierarchy is. It basically says that before we can reach our highest states of self-actualization, is that we have lower needs that must be met first. And so what Maslow said is that before we can achieve anything, we first have to meet the lowest needs that we have. And so they start from the most basic state of things like hunger, all right? Safety is actually a level above, but it is very similar to that as well. And it is on each one of these levels that we find some way in which we can drive a message towards marketing. That's all you really need to know about Maslow. I'm just going to say also this about the Herzberger two-factor theory, is that he believed that we're driven by motivations that are known as satisfiers and dissatisfiers, okay? And so a satisfier is something that causes satisfaction, and a dissatisfier is something that causes dissatisfaction, all right? And what he states is that it is not enough simply to lack dissatisfaction as a motivation. He said there has to be something that satisfies us. There has to be something that drives us, that motivates us, especially to overcome the cost that it takes for us to do things. And so an example is we're all sitting here at 7 o'clock nearly at night, and we're all driven and motivated by a need that is not just simply the desire to avoid something, but to achieve something. And that's what he believes in this satisfier, dissatisfier. He believes that satisfiers are more important than just simply the need to avoid others. And so this is, of course, Maslow's hierarchy, psychological needs. Maslow also considers sex in there as well. The safety needs, security and protection, and the social needs, which are a sense of belonging and love. And I'm kind of going to just state that as a yes but theory, because there's enough information about the whole concept that Maslow talks about to know that esteem needs and social needs are not only desirable, but drive us even if we don't have the other needs as well. We know this is that the drive towards esteem and self-actualization will make us ignore the lower cases. We'll ignore food, we'll ignore sleep, we'll ignore shelter when we're desiring to achieve a given goal. And so while that is a good theory, like most good theories, it doesn't explain everything, especially with human behavior. Perception. I wish I could show you this, but there's a great study that they did of people in an elevator, and are people milling around in front of an elevator, and then somebody walking across carrying a ball. And the fact is that 9 out of 10 people miss actually seeing that because we perceive looking at everyone else kind of mumbling around. And what perception is it's the process in which we organize and interpret information to create some kind of meaningful environment around us. What it also says many times is that we're willing to ignore what we see, especially if it interferes with our perception of the world in general. Now, that is kind of a heavy-duty thing to think of, but it is very much true. We are willing to perceive very much the things that are important to us and ignore the things that we don't consider. And I'm not going to go into too much of these. I do want to talk about selective attention and selective distortion. So selective attention basically means that we screen things out. So does anybody have a daily route that they drive every day? We going back and forth between places. One of the things that we know, especially when we do billboard advertising, is that it will take 15 occurrences of passing by something, and eventually what you're going to do is just zone it out, okay? And so you have anywhere from 3 to 5 seconds to make some kind of perception on an individual, and after that, people just zone it out. And so billboard advertising is built up around 5 exposures, less than 5 seconds each. And so by planning that, all right, we understand basically how individuals, what they will filter out and what they'll take a look at. The interesting thing is this, is we tend to look at deviations that are large in nature versus small in nature, all right? And so the Mini Coopers did a great advertisement. They did a guerrilla campaign. And one of the things that they did was they put a Mini Cooper on the side of a building and basically said all-wheel drive like no other car. And it got it, and people retained it because it was large enough in nature for individuals to accept that, all right? Selective distortion is the way that we interpret information that fits our preconception. Many times, if we have a favorite coffee place or a place to eat or a place to drink, if it's quite not as good as we want, we will still accept it as being excellent because it fits the perceptions of that particular good that we want. And it is one of the reasons why Starbucks does so much to build up the atmosphere inside of their particular places, because for them, the experience of being in the Starbucks is 90% of it beyond just the coffee itself. When they initially in 2006, they had a lot of issues, especially when they were cooking fresh breakfast, and it was things such as biscuits and sausage. Because what happened was it was distorting this view of Starbucks as someplace different, and the smells actually recreated the thoughts of McDonald's, all right? And so when Starbucks stopped that and they went to the breakfast cakes, then it became ultimately the Starbucks appeal, and people were happier with that. It's interesting, Starbucks did not have a director of marketing until 2004. And so they grew for 30 years without anyone really driving marketing efforts. And their point was, well, you know, we're all marketing experts. Yep. Okay. So learning, which is what you're doing here. The most important thing in the definition of learning is change. The definition of learning says that you induce changes in behavior that arise from your experiences. And that is what learning is. It is my hope that you get from this class, along with the basic knowledge, is that you will change your cognitive processing when it comes to thinking. I'm not trying to change what you think, but I'm trying to help you learn how to think a little bit better, okay? Certainly you're thinking outstandingly, the fact that you're all master's students, okay? But when you're in an MBA in a graduate class, to me, the scholarship falls back, and I know you need those grades, and I'm doing whatever I can to help you with the grades. But for me, what you're doing on the casework is the stuff that you're going to carry for the rest of your life. And this is what education is supposed to be about. It's your ability to generalize assumptions and discriminate as well. And that's the whole process of what learning is, okay? We also know this is that we desire to learn in a complete scenario. And so what this means is that when we're presented with incomplete knowledge, the brain is desired to fill in the gaps, to know more. And so this is why the first consumer behavior of this, I think it was Milgram, he was actually, he watched a waiter, and what she was doing is that she was filling in her ticket for them, and she wasn't putting everything in. She was putting like 3/4 of the stuff in. And he said, "What are you doing?" And she said, "Well, I remember that way if I don't have everything down." And he went, "Hold it," okay? And he did a research on it. And what he found is that when individuals are given 90% or 95% of everything, that the brain fills in the rest. And so if you ever hear any music that ends without the last stanza, you'll fill that in yourself, okay? Music had trail-offs, okay? They started trail-offs in the 60s because they knew that you were trying to fill in the rest of the music on the way, and you remembered it more as it went off. And so that's an example of what learning does and how to use it. Emotions, we know this, is that emotions are very much linked to brands, and emotion is an evaluation. We kind of think of remote emotions as being, separate from being functional and rational. But yes, it is, but without the emotional part, we lose connection. It is emotion that brings about our desire to share our experiences with someone else and pass the emotive state of relating to another brand. And so if I were to say to you, Apple, or if I were to say Starbucks, I would create an emotive response every time I talked about that. And those emotive responses are based upon the mythos or the history of our relating with that particular brand. Emotions, as I said, arousals are immediate, emotions are evaluations, all right? And very much what happens during the process of introducing a marketing brand to you is you're being led on a journey so that you build an emotive state towards whatever that particular brand is, especially on the internet. They have a concept known as native advertising. And what native advertising does is it tells you the story or the mythos or the history of that particular brand and how it got to that particular place. And in sharing of the myth, what it does is it brings you to the same emotive state that the brand is trying to convey to you, all right? And so, yes, emotions are powerful, they are permanent, they sear our memories into particular brands, and it makes us desire to wish to share them as well, okay? Now, I could spend a year talking about memory, but I'm not. But what I am going to say is I'm going to talk about the short-term and long-term memory and the key psychological processes there, all right? So if we are to look at some research and talk about cognitive psychology a little bit, all right? We have what is known in our brain as the apperceptive mass, all right? And then the apperceptive mass is the complete storing of all of the knowledge, of all of the experiences that we've had in our lives, okay? And in our brain itself, they have these particular places that are known as memory nodes, all right? And the memory nodes are where our experiences in life are stored. And we actually have two locations. We have short-term memory, which is stored in the cerebral cortex. You don't have to know any of this stuff, okay? And we have long-term memory that is stored deeper. Now, the short-term memory is finite. It is limited in size. And it is quickly replaced, okay? Our long-term memory is unlimited. I think we have 6 billion brain cells, and I think when you come out to the total attitudinal nodes, it's something preposterous. We have the total cumulative cognitive ability of 260 to 300 years, something crazy. Okay, it's unlimited. It is long-term storage. Okay. And I should say permanent as well. So, how do we as marketing take our memories and store them into long-term? Well, the way that we do it is we build what is known as associations. And so what we hope to do is we take associations with ideas that are short-term in nature, and we build them with long-term memory, all right? And so what we do is we come up with an idea that spurs something in long-term memory. And once that particular idea is spurred to long-term memory will link it to short-term memory, and it gets stored in the long-term memory and becomes part of our permanent memory, all right? And so this is why in so many studies, which you will, or in so many marketing campaigns, so many of those will basically show you associations like you being with your parents, or being with friends, or being in some shared experience that you've already had before. And what they're hoping to do is that you take that and you store it in somewhere in your head, and that place is associated forever. Interesting thing, we'll talk about this later. Music is stored in a different place in your head than words are. As a matter of fact, I was reading a study, and the part in your brain where music is stored is older cognitively than the place in your brain where words are stored. And so if you look at the first languages in the world, they were tonal in nature. So if you look at Cantonese, you look at Sanskrit, you look at any of those, they were tonal in nature. And my psychology professor, the way he said it was, before man knew how to speak, humanity knew how to sing. And so this is why so many times we can remember a jingle, or we remember music, and we remember the lyrics far faster than we remember anything else. So, you know, I wish I was Oscar Mayer Wiener. I'm sure that most of you know what the lyrics are, and that happened, 40 years before you were born, okay? And that's an example of these long-term connections in memory that that we hope to do in research that we can't do any other way, okay? All right, so we have the external processes with cultures. We have the external social groups as well. We have the internal processes that basically change us and affect us. And so once we've got those all together, let me also add one that's not in here that they're not talking about, but I want you to know, and that is environmental processes. In the last 20 years, we've had discussion of something that's known as time poverty. And it basically means that we no longer have the sufficient time to make detailed decisions like we did even 20 or 30 years ago. And so many times we make decisions, we're being pressed to make decisions in minutes, what we used to take weeks. And so the environment has become one of those inhibitors to us making more informed decisions. Having said that, the ability now to have untapped information wherever we go basically helps to augment the difficulties that we have with time poverty, okay? So the last thing I want to talk about this is, now that we've wrapped all these things together, let's talk about how humanity goes about making choices, okay? And so I don't know whether you remember this in your old principles of marketing. It's been around forever. I think the buying decision process was written something in like in 1952. I think Festinger, I can't even remember anymore. Anyway, not like I was around in 52, but basically this is what's known as the buying decision process. And what they basically state in theory is that consumers pass through 5 stages when it comes to making a choice. Now, let me first say this. Because of time poverty, many times consumers cut this. And so many times, especially with impulse items, we will not take the time, especially when it comes to the cost of making those choices. And instead of using thought processes, we do what's called the peripheral route, and we look for information cues like colors and shapes and those kind of things. And so where are the impulse items in any store? Anybody want to tell me? Checkout on your way out, exactly, okay? And when you're looking at the things, and when we're looking at on the way out, you're not trying to process, logically what you're looking for. You're looking for shapes, you're looking for colors, you're looking for things that are informational cues, and you're going to totally bypass this, okay? So if I'm looking in the candy aisle and I see orange, what is it? Could be a couple of things. Reese's, yeah, it could be a Reese's, all right? So that's an informational cue. If it's brown, it could be a Snickers bar, all right? And for interesting, Three Musketeers used to be a white wrapper, and people started passing it up. What is Three Musketeers wrapped with now? Anybody?
Like silver, right?
Silver, cellophane, exactly. Because the informational cues are more important now when it comes to this decision buying process, because you want them to go to the purchase decision instead of the rest of it. Okay, so let's talk about them one at a time. Problem recognition. Through internal or external stimuli, hunger, thirst, the buyer recognizes a problem or a need. Now remember, a need is for something vague. It is the difference between the actual and the ideal state. If it is a want, it is for something specific, and then you just jump directly to the end of the purchase. One of the things that marketers need to do is look at those particular instances where it triggers the buying decision as well, or the problem recognition. So I find I need something. The next is I do an information search. Now, the way that we search for goods is exactly in this order. We search personal sources first, above all things. And so you search yourself and your own past. The next thing you do is you search the memories of your friends because you trust them. And the third personal source that you search is word of mouth. And of course, with the internet, I'm not sure, but myself, I'm always looking at someone's personal evaluation before I am anything else. And this is also a big reason why if I'm in a business, I'm reading those personal evaluations as hard as I can. The next is we look at commercial sources. Those things tend to be technical in nature, and they can also be advertisements. But the thing about that is, of course, is that with commercial sources, because they're produced by someone else, we trust them not as much. And then the third is that we will look at public sources. And the public sources tend to be those produced by trade groups and organizations like that. The difficulty with trade groups and organizational work is just like secondary research. It's being written for a different purpose than you wanted at that particular time, all right? Primary research is always better because you're looking for particulars for the item that you want, and the public sources may think that other things are more important than your own personal desires. The next is, as you start to define what you consider to be the item that you wish to choose. And so this individual is going through the process of buying a machine. So you're starting to look at which evaluation of alternatives you wish. So the total set are all of those particular brands that are available for you to choose from. The awareness set is exactly what it sounds like, those brands that you are personally aware of, and through whatever advertising you can possibly find. The consideration set are only those brands that you would consider purchasing. And so, of course, this is 2004, Compaq was still around, but in the consideration set here, Hewlett-Packard and Compaq are not considered brands that this individual would choose. And so the consideration set boils down to three that meet, in essence, what would be considered a minimum acceptable standards by the buyer. And so what does that mean? Design, style, performance. The choice set comes down to the final grouping of those individual brands that they wish to buy. And then finally, decision process itself. Now, how do we evaluate alternatives? I'm not going to really care about the expectancy value model, so don't worry about this. Basically, it comes down to every individual has what they consider to be attributes which are considered to be minimum accepted values. And when we hit those minimum accepted values, those are those items that we consider to be worthy of buying. And then finally, we make a purchase. Now, in the purchase itself, after we make all of these choices, we tend to use heuristics. And so a heuristic is basically what's known as a mental rule of thumb. And so a conjunctive heuristic is that minimum standard that the choice set has to meet. A lexicographic heuristic, excuse me, is the one thing that the consumer looks at as the most important thing. So I went through a little argument. Well, not an argument, maybe a friendly discussion. I've been working on PCs for quite a long time, and I've used the Lenovo's, and I'm just firmly in love with them. 40 years of working on laptops or whatever, the Lenovo, to me, in my own opinion and no one else's, has to me the best keyboard feel of any machine I've ever used in my life, bar none. And I'm a very easygoing individual. I take any assignments that I ask for. But one of the things I loved about the Lenovo is I could fold it backward and I could use it as a pad. It has a stylus on it, and I needed it for my work. And the IT guy here said, well, we're going to take it away and put in a Dell. And I said, no. I mean, no offense to Dell, I understand, but I know the university has, set that as a minimum standard, but I absolutely refused. To me, I wanted the feel that comes from that Lenovo. And I said, look, if I can't fix it, if you won't fix it, let me just take it out and fix it. And apparently had a talk with the dean, and the dean said, give him what he wants. So I was like, wow, thanks, dean. I appreciate that. Okay, so lexicographic heuristic. The single thing to me that I think is the most important is a keyboard feel. And that's my heuristic that I use. Heuristics also are mental rules of thumbs that totally throw away the buying process too. The one in the 80s, you'll never get fired for buying an IBM. That sold 40 million IBMs in 3 years, okay? There are many of those that are like that as well. And so if you follow the heuristics, sometimes they'll lead you to success and sometimes not, okay? I'm not gonna worry about perceived risk, but I do wanna talk about the post-purchase behavior. Post-purchase satisfaction is one of the least understood and most difficult things to study. And if we don't have it, we have chaos. Post-purchase evaluations by consumers basically determine whether they've made a good purchase or not. And we know this is that, as we talked about with satisfaction, satisfaction is an okay feeling, whereas dissatisfaction is a call to order. And so when the consumer gets his machine or her machine, it's very possible for them to develop or have some difference of feeling on what they actually expected it would feel like. And this is a concept that's known as cognitive dissonance, all right? And so the expectation is we're going to enjoy this thing, but when we actually get it, it's not quite the ball of wax we thought it was. And one of the things that we want to be able to do, and this is why the need to be accurate more than ever is needed, is that we want to be able to close this gap so that the experience that the consumer has is exactly what they expect, okay? Okay, I just flew through that chapter, and we're going to take it right there. Let's do this. Let's take about a 5-minute break if you want to, and I'm going to start setting up the groups. Is everybody online right now? Would you please get online? Go into Zoom. Everyone online, I would like for you to get this that I emailed you, okay? And so this case that I emailed, I would like for you to get this out, and I would like for you to put this on your PC, because I'm going to start to put you in groups with your members. And I want you to take about 20 or 30 minutes to look this over. And all I want you to do is do a SWOT analysis with this, okay? All right, everybody? All right, so let me go ahead and I'll just hand that to pass that out.
So you want us to get us on
Yeah.
the Zoom too?
Yeah, go, everybody go into Zoom right now. And what I'm gonna do is, once everybody's in Zoom, I'm gonna start putting you into groups, okay? All right. So, yeah, this is gonna take a little pernickety. Let's see. So here are the groups.
Yeah, that might be helpful.
Michelle. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So. All right. So I'm going to start creating breakout rooms. And I'm going to start moving you in them, okay? Yeah. Of course, I could have put that somewhere better. Okay. Oops, wrong. Yeah. Carissa, Polly, and Sharon. Okay. Chad, Marshall, Jake, and Darby. Okay, I don't see him tonight. Okay. So Nick, Adam, Hervé, and Bradley. And then Abigail, Peter, and Tyler. Okay. So you've all been invited to your rooms. What I'd like for you to do is spend some time looking at this. And I want you to come up together, say hello to each other. And I'd like for you to just put together a little SWOT analysis, okay? Look at the facts in there. See what you consider to be your opinions on it, and pass that back and forth to each other. If I wish they'd have seats outside so you could sit outside if you wanted to, but whatever you wish to do, you know, get together, at least say hello and exchange email addresses with each other, okay? Is there anything I need to explain or anything? Yes.
Just a point of concern, with a lot of us on mics and in these Zoom rooms where like broken out, like there's a pretty big chance that feedback's gonna get pretty bad.
The what's gonna get?
Feedback.
Okay.
Like where the mics are like picking each other up.
Okay, I've got you. Why don't you just text with each other? And why don't you email each other a list? If all of you have the mics, I guess let's handle the problem when it comes up, okay?
Okay, yeah.
Let's just see if we get a feedback first, and if we do, we'll fix it, okay?
Yeah, okay, sounds good. I was just.
All right. Thank you for telling me, because this is the first time I've done this, so please go right ahead.
think we're all in person. Our group is.
You're all here?
Are we
One
all
on
in
person.
person?
Well, that's cool. If you're all here, then jump out. Okay. When is the luck of that?
Do you want to
So we just read through the whole thing first and then.
I guess.
Yes.
So, so there's like, we're starting to put in some of the different things.
Okay.
But also, I'm guessing, I'm sorry, can you pronounce your name just because
Poly,
Ollie?
yeah. Poly D, Poly Pocket.
Okay. I'm not in y'all's group.
I thought I was in.
You're
You're with them, yeah.
Oh, y'all two.
No.
Hello, I'm Adam.
Wait, let me.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, might keep me outside with y'all too.
Yeah.
It didn't, it was general.
Oh, yeah. Yes,
So, the first thing I saw with this thing was the fact that I like the first. And it's not really like the last one.
Mhm.
Like that concept of the first movie. With the mind is strong. Yeah, I didn't know this thing before, like 5 years before.
Also, they mentioned like a video calling, like, was that thing on actual phones back then? Like 2009?
Yeah, it's true.
That we could put on the watch.
Yeah,
I guess it's just very innovative.
it's true.
Basically, to take everybody's idea. Well, if we get a long enough chat screen, we could always just like, just copy and paste it, and then get rid of our names, we can make a SWOT analysis.
So, one of the problems is that they don't cover the target market. That's very defined. So that could probably be an opportunity to kind of cover the target market.
Do they already have a market like for their regular phones at this point, or are they just introduced like this watch as just a new, they've never done phones before, at least in the US?
Yeah, because it said that they were gonna try and get their phone users to switch over. So I think they had.
Yeah. Can you imagine switching your whole phone to a watch? I don't think I could do it. So did they not work together? I guess
That's why
not.
it didn't work.
So it's like a whole separate thing.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah, and then like, it's part of the issue, I think, is that because we're technically like half the person at that time. Yeah, because I think we've gotten like a decent spread of like. Yeah, and if you wanted, we could just make a Word document, and share it. Yeah. Yeah, that's a lot smarter than we did to start with, but it should be too hard to migrate things over. So I'll let them know. Okay.
Weeds could be, that you couldn't have like private conversations because it's all the speaker.
Mhm.
Things public.
I think it's strength is that they're the first in the market. A threat is obviously like Apple is developing one.
So at this point, were smartwatches the thing? This is just the first
I
phone
think
smart.
I think this is the first one, except for, it seems like this one was not like already connected to your phone. Like it's like a separate thing,
You guys see my screen?
like people would buy it.
If you're looking at the
Okay,
time of this is when they were even defining what the watch meant. You know, they're coming up with even, you know, and as with all definitions, it needs to be mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive. What is it and what is it not?
I don't know if you know anything specifically about these watches, but it looked like, looking at like the models of it, that there was like a pop, like a twist off back, like spot in the back to use the battery. Like, were these phones intended to not be rechargeable and you just have to keep switching out batteries on frequently?
These originally were being used or being built in conjunction to use hearing aid batteries.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's,
Isn't it expensive?
yeah. these are
Well,
cheap.
when you consider the fact that, you know, the small lithium batteries were not really perfected at that point,
Mhm.
that's what they were going with, you know.
That's crazy.
But if you think about it now, I mean, you're talking about also the time when the Nokia flip phones around. Look at the phones that they have.
Oh, that last
So,
page.
yeah, it's important to look
Yeah.
at those because it gives you an understanding of the time frame that it was in.
Mhm.
You know, everything, all right, but had yet to really make that move. And smartphones have really been only around since 2008, 7, okay? You're really just seeing the penetration of the market.
You never have to watch this, I was like, wait, what? Yeah, I really appreciate it. It's like the watch, like $1,300. Yeah. I think they were gonna try to like either price it really high, so, or price it like low to get into it. But I feel like that could be a weakness, yeah. Well, oh yeah,
It could be a threat from competitors if
European.
they price it cheaper.
Yeah, it's-
No, it didn't say anything like a pet. So the competition could come in at too low prices.
Yeah, I guess being first on the market, like, well, it's a strength, it's also kind of a weakness. They don't really have they don't actually have a group of people that already own this that might be interested. But they're trying to introduce it to the whole.
Another strength is that they seem to have like easier relationships with the Canadian suppliers. They didn't really talk about like US as much, but this is a Canadian case. Like they could easily get it through different carriers. Another opportunity to decide what kind of medium they would use to promote it. Yeah. I like the promotion. can.
The weakness could be that graph shows that they only have 5% of that market share. That probably limits the amount they reach for consumers.
Appreciate you compiling all of that.
I think I'm almost done. I'm still typing.
I added one with it. No one else really has.
It's just this.
Yeah, so.
I guess on the flip side, an opportunity is that they could expand their market share by introducing it.
Mm-hmm. Always a bright side.
I don't know if I would call it design stylish or like now times, but I feel like back then it was, but maybe kind of reevaluating, going back and making sure that it's kind of like a go-to style of other, I guess our online launches, which is like keeping up with like a futuristic maybe approach, because I think that's what Apple does, is that they kind of present something different. So that could be really opportunity. Yeah, but I feel like the Apple Watch is more almost like a little iPod and just a band where we get around and trying to make it more look more like an actual watch face or like feel to it. That's how people were used to at the time. So yeah, or it could be a spring. Talked about it like it was like 20 years ago. Like I remember it feels like that. I think I got my first flip phone around that. Yeah, I think I got my sliding phone and then my bracelet also. I think I was still on, yeah, I was still on elementary school. Now, it's kind of, I don't know where I took this, probably opportunity, but they would have the opportunity to get feedback from the market so they could improve it, like kind of like start the generation thing, like, oh, we're gonna do a second generation. But then part of that is a threat that gives other people time to like perfect their own, I guess. Yeah. But yeah, kind of like the style stuff, they could change that if consumers don't like it.
We just really believe in the product. That's what it looks like. Um,
I think the interesting is we don't really have any mention of like exercise activities, and I feel like it's a big Apple Watch.
Well, and like Fitbit even came out before that,
Oh, yeah, that's true.
like just like the regular heart monitors and stuff.
Yeah, all that Apple Watch has, that's in there, I thought that would help. Swimming in one.
Yeah, that's what I
Like definitely, it seems like it would
maybe it would.
Yeah, like, did it have apps or completely all? It looked like it was just.
It looks like you can maybe like text and call and
Yeah, we could text, call,
video call.
waterproof, Bluetooth.
It also worked as a music player in it. so
Yeah,
There's that. I don't think
Oh,
most,
text to speech.
yeah. Under the product description.
We'll start talking about it in about 10 minutes.
This could be a threat, so talk, like with the distribution option, to talk about going through one carrier. And if it did that, and then also the high price, that could be like alienating for some people. Seems like it's a luxury item, like hard to get.
Yeah, it seems like they're trying to go for the more like futuristic, little watch thing rather than the fitness, like compact. I mean, yeah, fitness and mobility.
Yeah.
You just
Especially with
mentioned it,
Ultra.
like how it's not two of everything.
It could be the opportunity for promotion aspect.
Yeah.
Something like that, like futures spot.
I mean, it says that, but is it really offering anything that a normal phone at that point wasn't really doing?
Cool.
It's like, whenever people got Bluetooth, it's just kind of extra, it feels like.
I don't like to take calls on that Apple Watch. It's really nice all the time.
Yeah, I don't, weakness is like they don't necessarily know the durability of it, like they said it's waterproof and stuff, but like how long is it actually gonna last if you're spending that much money?
I said, thank you. In the chat.
And then I.
Also,
The Apple Watches don't just like hit a button for it to push water out.
depends on, yeah. If you
There's
have
a
to-
button that does it.
Yeah, you have to like put it on. You can put it on the water mode before you go in the water. And then like afterwards, you have to like spin this and like vibrates to get the water out.
Pretty neat.
Yeah, but if you're not proactive about it and it gets wet on accident and you didn't like anticipate that, then I guess you could turn it on and it won't automatically.
Because
do it.
even when you're like washing your hands, don't you get a little water in it sometimes?
Sometimes, yeah, but it's not entirely like
I
that.
feel like I should, because I know even the phones now are like a little water resistant.
I mean, I got in the shower with it and it was on accident, but my friend uses it for swimming and she doesn't have an issue, which is kind of insane to me. But yeah, I don't bring it to the beach because I just get scared. Possibly.
Looks like everybody's coming to where they have an opinion. So why don't I just go ahead and we can get out of this shindig a little earlier. Let's go. Everybody ready out there? I take that for a yes.
We're all still in the breakout rooms.
Oh,
So
you are?
they can't see you.
Okay, that's right. Okay, I'm breaking you up, kids. Closing you out. Breaking up that old gang of mine. Hope you exchanged emails with each other.
All right. I'm hopping out of here.
I'll send you emails out tomorrow, so everybody gets everybody's email. Don't worry about it. I was gonna do that anyway. 30. There goes everybody. All right. All right, so one of the things to note when we're talking about these things, the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities of threats, they can be assumptions by you based upon your facts that you looked at, or they can also be factual information that comes direct from it. And so you can either do a reflective assumption based upon a fact, or you can give me the fact itself. So let's go ahead and we're going to kind of put some things together. Can somebody give me anything, okay? Start me up. Any fact.
Strength is first wearable to market.
First wearable to market. Thank you, Chad. Okay. Go ahead. Same thing?
Yeah, it's got video calling, I guess.
Video calling?
Yeah.
Okay, video calling. Okay. Anything else? Something else?
A weakness, it sounded like they wanted to convince people away from like their current handheld phones, which I don't think that would work very well.
Moving away from handheld. Okay.
Weakness would be like the high price.
I
It's like
tried-
$1,200. It's like $1,200, $1,300.
That's a big one. That's a giant one. Okay. What else?
Potential strength, though, is that since they've already done the high pricing in Europe, they have more flexibility with the pricing in Canada.
More flexibility with pricing. Yes. Okay. What else? Can anyone give me like an opportunity or a threat?
A threat, since like Chad said, it is the first wearable to market. A threat would be, you know, other phone companies trying to copycat your product.
Copycat and very good, Marshall, second mover advantage. Okay. Second mover advantage can be a very strong thing because basically what they do is they can piggyback up on the education that you bring to the market of the product, look at your weaknesses and see where the strengths of your product can come along. Very good. Anybody else?
An opportunity is they could expand their market share.
Expand market share, right. And I think if we're looking at this, we're also, it's an untapped, at this point, an untapped wearable market. Because if we're looking at the nature of the market itself, it hasn't yet been defined, okay?
Kind of going off that too, I think an opportunity would be presented to partner with carriers. I would think that mobile phone carriers would kind of jump all over this, being that it's the first wearable watch phone.
Agree, and certainly that was one of the things that the iPhone, when it first came out, it had a distinct advantage, is that instead of choosing multiple carriers, they said, we'll give you everything. In other words, we'll do just one. And that meant that AT&T and Sprint and all of them could bid at the same time, and it meant a distinct advantage for Apple.
I think another opportunity could be, it could almost become like a fashion piece, like it could be stylish.
Yeah, fashion statement, very good. Okay. Now I'm going to throw a thread out there, and I'm going to call it disruptive technology. And basically what this means is that we have a product that spans two different product categories. It's a cell phone, it's a wearable technology, it's an internet technology. And the difficulty is how do we mend all of those pieces together, okay? When disruptive technologies, the cultures and the products crash together, all right? So is it a cell phone? Does it require its own cell license to be able to use it? Can you use it in conjunction with the current cell phone that you have? Does it require you to give up your cell phone and go solely to this? Well, you're talking about a screen that's 2.5 inches broad. That makes it very difficult to be able to use. And so this is one of those difficulties that you have when technology, innovation starts crashing together, and really there's no defined market quite yet. And so that's what this brings up. Anything else? Okay. What would you do? Anybody, what would you do?
I would try to make it like an accessory to a phone.
Okay.
I just couldn't see someone getting rid of a phone, like their phone, just to have a 2-inch like screen.
I think, it's a really, really difficult. This is one of those, it's only 6 pages long, but it's like, my God, I mean, where do I, what's the answer to all of this, okay? I mean, and this is the problem is that whatever direction you go down, is it a right direction? Who knows? Did anybody think they shouldn't launch at all? Even think it?
Well, I think there's always going to be a market for like early adopters for new technologies.
Right.
And you're always going to have those that 2-5% of the population that just has to have their hands on that new toy, right?
The 2.5% of all innovative buyers who will buy regardless, just for the fact that they're innovations. That's correct. Yes.
So I think if you structure it in such a way where you pose this as a new product and you're like, you didn't even know you were missing this in your life until now. Like you're going to be able to get at least those early adopters. And if it becomes that status symbol, it's one of those things, if you can get it just like snowball, it can be very successful.
Yes.
You just have to get the snowball started.
Yeah, and it's a fascinating category. It's one of the reasons why smartphones in general have taken so long to come to market. And the problem is the definition of what do you mean, okay? If anyone remembers, Samsung launched with their phone, I think it was 2015, I can't remember. But the difficulty that Samsung had is the same difficulty that Apple phones have as well, is how do you define what they are? And it wasn't until you came up with applications that brought purpose to buying it, other than just simply wearing a phone, that you saw the, now, they've sold well, but they never have hit the numbers that they expected. And that's the truth. But they've gone much better, because now what you find is that Apple phones have a purpose and a function. Who really has cashed in on the wearable technology beyond what anyone thinks? You want to give a guess? Which company really has cashed in on wearable technology? Fitbit, exactly. Fitbit slam dunked, okay? And the reason that Fitbit slam dunked is because it had a purpose from the very beginning, okay? And that is the thing that you must understand, folks, when you have new product categories, is that yes, they can be cool, but do they have a purpose, all right? And once again, we're talking about the very basics of what marketing is and what consumers are, because it's not enough that you have a product that may be unique and special. Remember, especially when we're talking about consumer behavior, we're selling to consumers, and we will get those innovators because they will buy regardless. But if we're going to become into the early majority stages, the ones that really are going to drive it, we've got to find a purpose for those individuals to buy, okay? So this was cool. This was a really good start. This kind of gives you an idea of where we're going to go in the cases. I'll have all of the rest of your stuff finished by tomorrow. I promise, folks. I just apologize. We're moving back and forth now, and I think we're going to finally have some stability in the next few weeks. I'm praying that we're going to be total face-to-face by the end of the semester. But anyway, good work, folks. Excellent job. I'll update you on the test tomorrow. I will email all the groups so everybody knows who is in the group with each other. Good work, folks. Keep those cases, and I will see you next week, okay? All right, take care.
Thank you, Dr.
Have a good
Strauss.
one.
Have a good one, Jake. Bye, Jack. Bye, Marcia. Bye, Angie.
Sorry.